Hey everyone, Chris here from VarsityGaming. Welcome back to another monthly Q&A. So for those of you who didn't know, I made a post on the community part of the YouTube channel asking people for questions, and I grabbed a few of my favorite questions from the community. Now a few of these might have been asked in the past. I added them again just because they're common questions or because I had more to elaborate on them. But anyways, let's get into the questions. So our first question of the video comes from Mason asking, do you think the red dot site should become a 1.5 times scope to make it more viable? Now, I know a lot of you might actually think that Red Dot is a really good site, but unfortunately, the reality is it is not. Each site has its own advantages and disadvantages. The holographic has the tiniest dot in the middle, so you can easily see what you're about to shoot at, but it also has another circle around it and other lines to try to distract the person looking through it, and also has a big housing, which means that you won't be able to see as much in your peripheral. The reflex has a super tiny housing, which means you'll be able to see a lot. However, its reticle is a triangle, and the triangle is not that small, so it makes it a tiny bit harder to aim. But then there's the red dot. The reason why the red dot isn't a good sight is because the dot is fairly large, the housing is fairly large and takes up a lot of your screen, and you don't really see too much inside the site itself. If you're already going to go for large housing, you might as well go for holographic because it has a tinier dot in the middle. For the most part, sites are completely preference based. Like, you can use whatever site you want and you can do fairly well. But statistically, the red dot site is worse. So anyways, enough with the explanation. To answer the actual question, I think adding a 1.5 times magnification, or maybe somewhere in between like a 1.25, would probably make the red dot site a little more viable. And it definitely would be something I'd be interested in seeing because there's always been a pretty huge gap. It's either no magnification at all when you take the hollow red dot or reflex, or 2.5 times when you take the ACOG. Having a middle ground would probably add more diversity, and personally I'd be all for it. Second question from Colin asking, how long do you see yourself doing YouTube in general? Do you think being a YouTuber can be a stable job? Normally when people ask multiple questions in one comment, I only answer one of them, but since these two are very close together, I will answer both of them. For the first part, I see myself doing YouTube as long as it's actually sustainable. For many of you who have been watching my channel or many others for the past year, you'll know that last year a lot of creators got hit with the adpocalypse, which is where a lot of videos were getting demonetized and where content creators like me were seeing a 75% drop in revenue, going from earning a couple thousand a month to earning maybe a few hundred. So a lot of us got hit pretty hard with that. And it really made us question the possibility of YouTube being stable. So far everything's come back to normal and I've actually been doing super well for myself. So for the time being, as long as everything stays the same way, I can see myself doing YouTube forever, honestly. But what I said basically answers the second part. YouTube is not really a stable job. Every day when I wake up, I check my YouTube analytics, and for the most part, it's stable. But there have been some days where I will see a huge dip in views, and I have absolutely no idea why. Keep in mind, we are content creators putting up videos on someone else's platform. We have absolutely no say in how our content gets distributed. YouTube can decide to show whatever they want to show, and we have absolutely no say in the matter. So it's not at all stable, and it's fairly scary because one day YouTube could say, hey, we don't actually want any more video game gameplay on our website. And either everyone would have to adapt and do something else, or we'd have to move on to a different site which would not be nearly as profitable as YouTube. So that's why for the time being, and I'm trying to be completely honest when I say this, I'm doing YouTube as long as I can make money and then I'm going to get the fuck out. I understand YouTube will probably crash and burn within the next few years, and I know I'll probably have to go and get another job. So for the time being, I'm trying to make my money while I can and saving it. Third question comes from Mark asking, do you think the matchmaking system is fair and ranked? So I kind of touched on this in the hacking video that I just posted on Saturday, where I basically said the matchmaking and ranking system in Siege is fairly broken. One of the fixes that they're trying to implement is that you will no longer be able to queue with people who are a much lower or much higher rank than you. And that'll help fix a lot of the problems because a lot of the times you'll have people who are stuck in gold or silver going against players who should be in diamond. But instead they're like platinum queued with a friend who's copper or bronze. And then it'll really ruin someone's chances of actually getting out of that elo hell. They'll be stuck there longer. And this is what kind of causes elo hell. People who should be in diamond but dropping down to silver or bronze and then they just can't get out. But really, I don't think it's an issue with people queuing up with people of different ranks. Like I said in the hacking update video, ranks are not at all evenly distributed. Almost every single rank between silver and gold is about 100 elo apart. Then when you get into platinum, they're about 300 to 400 elo apart. And then when you get into bronze and copper, they're all still 100 apart until you get to Copper 4, in which case it's 1400 elo big. You can go from 1400 all the way down to 0. That's a fucking huge range. So once they fix this distribution, I think it would be a lot more fair and matchmaking would actually work. And you'll have a lot less people getting stuck in elo hell. I don't know if getting rid of placements or how to change placements would really fix anything, but there has to be a better solution than the one that is already implemented. Next question comes from Drorky. I don't know how to fucking pronounce it. How come you never play with other content creators, Marley, Tux, Pit, etc.? So this is a question I've 100% answered in the past, but I will answer again just because I kind of have some new information on it. So in the past, I've always said I don't play with content creators because I'd rather play with friends. They're more fun. Not bashing on content creators, just saying I have a good friendship with my friends. We have a lot of back and forth. Personally, for me, it's more fun to hang out with them than to hang out with other people who are going to go for content. Now, ever since I last talked about this, I have played with a few other content creators. And still, for the most part, my answer still stays the same. Like, if, say, Drew, Rob, and the rest of them all wanted to play a game of Siege, I would much rather play with them than if a bunch of content creators said, hey, we're going to go for a few videos and play some ranked and 5-stack. I'd have a lot better of a time with my friends. However, my experiences with playing with other content creators hasn't been that bad. They're actually pretty fun for the most part, but it's still kind of a different environment. For the most part, content creators really want to try to rank up and get a higher rank. When it comes to my friends, all they care about is just having fun and getting kills. I even asked Rob one time saying, do you actually have fun playing with me? Because it doesn't seem like you would if you just die all the time. And he's just like, nah, man, I just like blowing shit up and getting into the building. It's fun. So it's two different types of wheelhouses. So I can definitely see myself playing with more content creators in the future if they ask me, but for the most part, I'm content with my friends and really probably wouldn't reach out to other people to play with them. I'll still collaborate with other content creators when it comes to creative videos, but that's about it. Next question from Seth saying, did you really make Minecraft videos a few years ago? Not saying that Seth is trying to do this, but I have been asked this a lot recently. I'm assuming people are trying to embarrass me. I have no shame in saying that yes, I made a ton of Minecraft videos. I also made a ton of other videos like Super Mario Bros. And random Nintendo games, and a bunch of random arcade games on the Xbox. Back when I was in high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with the channel, and I just kind of threw up whatever I wanted. My friends would come over once a week. We'd come down to my basement and play video games for like 4 hours, and I just record a shit ton of content. This was before really anyone watched our videos. I would get like 7 views a video if I was lucky. The Minecraft ones were the most popular. They would get a couple hundred, sometimes a couple thousand. I also did some animations. And a lot of people have told me to delete all this from my channel because it's not relevant to it anymore. But I really have no shame in it. I like looking back from where I started and what really kicked off this channel. If I were ashamed of it, I would actually delete it, but I'm not. I'm proud of where I came from. I know a lot of other content creators really don't like showing it and they want to only show what is actually relevant to their channel now, but I don't care. If you want to go back and look at them, you can. Hell, the Meet the Spy in Minecraft animation is still one of my most viewed videos on my channel and was my first video to ever cross 1 million views. That's something that sticks with me. And I'll be proud of that video until the day I die. Next question coming from Ordinary Cement asking, is mouse and keyboard on consoles cheating? So I saw on Twitter a couple of days ago, apparently this has actually been officially stated by Ubisoft that using mouse and keyboard on consoles is actually cheating, and you can report players for doing so and get them banned from Siege. I don't know the exact parameters of this, or I don't know, just take it with a grain of salt. According to Ubisoft, it is cheating and not supported by their developers. However, it is now a feature of most consoles, and Sony and Xbox are really trying to promote it. Personally, I think it's a scumbag thing to do because it's the equivalent of, say, you went to your local youth hockey game and you were a fucking NHL player. It's like, yeah, you're going to destroy these kids because you're a pro and they're 5-year-old little shitters who barely know how to skate. And some people will be proud of the fact that they won, but for the most part, everyone else is just going to look at them and be like, what the fuck are you doing? You're ruining other people's fun just so you can feel better about yourself. That's how I see it. Next question from Farion asking, do you think Claymore should be given to Defenders in Rainbow Six Siege? I really don't see any reason why Defenders should have Claymores. I know actually Rob has asked me this a bunch before because he comes from Call of Duty and always said that Defenders should have the Claymores because they're the ones trying to cover their backs. But they don't really need it. Attackers are the ones who need to cover their backs because the defenders will be roaming and trying to flank them. And honestly, defenders don't even need an operator that would have something like a Claymore. I feel like that would just never see any use, and you don't really require it. The attackers are going to push in regardless, and they'll be looking for these traps, which would make this operator pretty useless if they had a Claymore. So for the time being, I'm happy seeing it only on attackers. Defenders really don't need it. Next question from Stefan or Steven or something. Which season was the best and worst, and why? Best season, Velvet Shell. Worst season, Chimera. Velvet Shell was the best because it introduced Mira, and also the season before that had Hibana. Those two operators completely changed up the entire meta of the game and how it was played out. Before that, a lot of things were much slower paced or not as destructive. Now everything's all about sight lines, destruction, and just trying to coordinate as a team. Chimera was the worst because it has Finka and Lion, and Outbreak. All horrible, horrible things that should never exist. Next question from Reese is asking, do you think Yacht should be in ranked? Why or why not? I personally really liked Yacht, and right before it got taken out, I had finally really learned to love the map and was used to and actually excited to play on it each time I got it. But I fully understand why it was removed. It had so many balancing issues. Ubisoft went fucking ham on trying to make the map as realistic as possible in terms of ambience and environment. Back when Season 1 of Year 1 started, Siege was still trying to be a super, super realistic shooter, to the point where they even changed attachments for weapons based on what they would be like in real life, which I'll talk about a tiny bit in the next question. But Ubisoft was all about making this super uber realistic. And because of that, there was always snow flying everywhere. Things were hard to see because the snow would cause glare onto the operator's sight. It was just full of effects and environment. And that made it horrible to play on because I can't tell you how many times I would look in from the outside as an attacker and I wouldn't be able to see shit because snow was just flying all across my screen. But on the defender's side, they wouldn't see anything because they were inside. And not to mention, Yacht was around when the old lighting system was still in effect, where if you were inside and you looked outside, it basically looked like you were looking into God's gaping asshole. It was bright as fuck. Meanwhile, if you were outside looking in, it was so dark it looked like you were looking into Satan's asshole. But once they removed the assholes from the game, it was a lot better to play. But then they quickly removed the map from ranked because they thought it wasn't competitive enough. And just simply because of the snow effects, I would kind of agree with them. But I have played it on casual since, and I really do enjoy having it back. So if they ever were to balance the map and get rid of all those shitty ambient effects that they don't need, then I think it would be a very viable ranked map. Next question comes from Jackson asking, why the fuck did the Russian operators have different sites than everybody else? This is what I was talking about in the last question that I said I would touch on, and also something I asked myself to my Twitch chat when I was streaming the other day, and they told me the answer. So, like I said, when Siege came out, Ubisoft was trying to be super realistic and have everything as realistic as possible. That included the Russians getting different sites than all the other operators. From what I've been told, the reasoning behind this is that Russia is not part of NATO, and all the countries that are part of NATO use the same sites, or a lot of them will use similar ones. So since Russia is not a part of that, they don't use the standardized sites. They use their own developed sites, or other variations of similar ones. I don't really know the specifics, but from what I've been told, it's just simply because they're not part of NATO. I would personally prefer Ubisoft to just throw out that whole realistic aspect and just give them the rest of the sites, like the sites that everyone else has, and get rid of the Russian sites altogether. But I feel like that's one of the legacy things that Ubisoft will try to hold on to for as long as they can. And then we have our next question. Alright, moving on. We have a question from Dark asking, do you think that realistically most of the future defense operators will be trap operators or not? For the most part, I feel like Ubisoft will probably take the easier route and just do trap operators, because if you think about it, it's way easier to come up with a bunch of traps on defense than it is to think of original gadgets. The only really unique operator in the entire game is Mira. She has a gadget unlike anyone else, and they haven't been able to reach that level of impact yet. We've had good operators come in, like Ella, but she was just incredibly overpowered and ridiculously stupid. But her gadget didn't really change the way the game was played. Mira's gadget itself changed everything. Ever since then, we've received a lot of trap operators, and I feel like Ubisoft will continue this route because it's way easier to do. When you have a full team whose sole objective is to defend something on a specific site, traps are way easier to develop. because you know the attackers have the initiative to come in, the defenders can just sit and wait. And if Ubisoft could pump out like 50 more trap operators, I'm sure they'll do it. But I hope they prove me wrong and actually do other stuff, but for the most part I think more traps are yet to come. And the final question of the video comes from Samuel, and I'm just going to summarize this. Basically asking, is there a way that Ubisoft or Fairfight could implement a system that would not punish teams as much for losing a 4v5 or reward teams as much for winning a 5v4? Now, I've tried to give this a lot of thought before because it's been a long-standing question, but I really don't know if there's any way for them to do that without tracking huge amounts of data. There was a system in place before where if you were missing someone on your team would lose a lot less elo. So let's say you were about to finish a match and you were down a person. Normally you would lose 75 elo for the match. Instead, this time you're only going to lose about 30. You'd still lose some, but it wouldn't be nearly as severe. Now, this was abused to absolute shit until Ubisoft removed it. Basically, what people would do was 5-stack, and if they were about to lose a match, one of their teammates would leave. That means everyone else on their team would lose 0 or very little elo, and then that one person would probably get like a 15-minute surrender sanction, which they would just go play a casual game, and then they go back into ranked. So they'd almost never lose elo, they'd only gain some. It got to a certain point where if you had a lot of people leave, you would always lose 0 elo, so it made it very easy for 5-stacks to climb the ranked ladder. So they removed this because it was getting exploited to shit, and I totally understand why they would remove it. But ever since then, I've never really thought of a good way to do it. I've talked to Drew about this extensively because he's right now stuck in this like bronze, silver limbo because he tries to keep solo queuing and he just can't get out of it. And a lot of the time, he says it's because after the first round, one of his teammates will leave and they're just stuck in a 4v5 for the entire match. And no matter what he does, he just can't do enough to compensate for that. But no matter what I try to think of, there's really no solution I can give. If someone left for the entire match, like never even connected, then I could say sure, maybe the team should lose a little less elo. But if a person keeps reconnecting, disconnecting back and forth, how do you really track what they've contributed to the match? Let's say someone is in the match for every single round, except for they keep disconnecting right after they die. Now, they might not be able to make calls on cameras while they're disconnected, but if they were alive and still contributed and got kills, should they be rewarded or punished for constantly disconnecting? If the game tracked it based on time, and the person got, say, 7 kills, 5 deaths, but was disconnected for half the match, should they really lose half their elo gain? No, they contributed a lot to the match. They should still have the same amount of elo gain or loss that the rest of the team does. So it's very hard to track this type of stuff and really hard to come up with a solution for it. Right now, the fact that nothing happens at all is pretty shitty, but I would rather that than have the old exploit back where 5-stacks would leave at the last second and then my team would earn no elo and their team would lose no elo. That was bullshit. This is for now a better solution to that. Alright, and that is going to be it for today. I was even trying to find more questions to answer, but I forgot how in-depth I get every single time, and I kind of ramble on. So thank you guys for watching this Q&A. If you have any more questions, prepare to ask them at the beginning of next month. Usually what I do is within the first week, I will post on the community part of the channel and ask for questions. The most voted up, and also some of my personal favorites, will be submitted. I mainly skim through them and try to find stuff that haven't been asked yet or stuff that isn't too personal. So keep that in mind when asking future questions. But until then, take care. I'll see you guys in the next video.